We'll get started.
Great.
So welcome everybody. We are going to get started here. It's 11 o'clock in California. Jacob, where are you?
I'm in Phoenix.
You're in Phoenix. Okay. Not too bad.
A couple more days, we have the same time zone as you, and then everyone else changes and we don't.
Okay. Exactly. Yeah, you guys are one of the few states that does that, which is always interesting. Well, I appreciate you jumping on here. We are recording the webinar, so for folks that would prefer not to be involved in the recording, now's your chance. But we know how hard it is for everyone to attend these things during the day, so the recording will be available over at Tenbound and on our YouTube channel. So today we are talking about the modern SDR tech stack. And, now that you've got the tech stack plugged in and you're good to go, now what? What's next? And so I'm joined today by Jacob Wiggins, who runs sales over at RightBound. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom. Tell us a bit about, yourself and what you're doing over at RightBound.
Yeah. First of all, thanks again for the invite. It's a real honor to join everyone here. And I know all the attendees are probably really busy, so plan to make this 45 minutes or so worth your while. And just a side note, I've attended some of your previous conferences, one over the summer specifically. I guess you do a couple a year that are these big conferences and offer a ton of value and have made some great connections. So thank you, David. A little bit about me. I've spent my career in sales and sales development at a number of organizations. Started out as an AE right out of college for a smaller publishing company, was an SDR and an SDR leader and a sales leader at a company called SciSense, and decided to join an organization called RightBound earlier this year. Where I am the first person in the sales team. Since then, we've grown the sales team by a couple headcount. And essentially what we do is we offer a SaaS solution that utilizes AI and machine learning, designed for outbound business development teams to automate and streamline their research and outreach efforts. So I can tell you all more about specifically what we do. I'm more than happy to connect after this on a one-on-one basis. But yeah, today really want to focus on how to get the most out of the modern sales stack. And what we see as an organization are the habits and things that the most successful high growth SDR teams are doing.
Yeah, I think it's very appropriate with what you're doing. We've really enjoyed working with RightBound for a while now on some of our projects, and it's been a great experience. So I appreciate you coming on. And so we're talking about the modern sales stack, right? So most of the people on the call, most of the people that would be interested in stuff that we're doing here, they've got the key components of a SDR sales stack plugged in. So I'd like to just go through, okay, those components, where there's gaps now, and then, some ideas on how to, fill those gaps now that they have everything in. And then I definitely want to make it open for Q&A. So as we're talking, if you've got any questions or comments or anything, throw them in the chat, and we'll spend a lot of time working through those. I think Jacob and I both agree that that's where a lot of the work gets done on these things. So we want to make this totally interactive. But Jacob, let's start with the number one. Like, what do you see as the modern sales development stack for folks who maybe, have that plugged in now, or they don't yet have some of these tools?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first got into sales, everyone was already using CRMs, obviously mostly Salesforce, but some others, Dynamics. And then at that point, and this is 11 years ago or so, basically the best that you could hope for would be some sort of like an automated dialer, where it would just cycle through numbers. So I used one called InsideSales.com, but there were plenty of others. Since then, obviously with technology just growing at a rapid pace, when I think about the modern stack, let's put CRM aside for now. The first thing that comes to mind is like a sales orchestration tool. So something like Outreach or Sales Loft, HubSpot Sales. Also, I implemented that at my last company because we were already using HubSpot for some other things, and that worked pretty well as well. But one of those outreach tools to basically give your team a framework in which to work, I guess you could say. So, you're able to preload those with obviously the messaging and emails that you want, set up your cadences for calling and LinkedIn touches and everything else. But obviously, most of the people on this call are probably familiar. Then I think also of LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is definitely an amazing way to stay up to date with prospects and companies and what's going on there. I think it's a great way to build your own brand. I know that there's some people that I follow on LinkedIn that really do offer value. And it's also a great way to keep up with, prospects or people that you've worked with and where they're going next, because obviously those relationships you may want to take advantage of, to sell to at other organizations. LinkedIn, I definitely think, has become a little oversaturated with people's personal views and all this other stuff that they want to talk about, but still tremendously valuable. Next, I would go into kind of your data tools. So ZoomInfo is obviously one that is quite a large organization since acquiring Discover.org. But then there's plenty of other data sources, Inside View and many others. And, obviously you're using those to try to pull the right contact information. And then also Gong, I think, is an amazing tool. Great CEO that I actually used to work with, where that tool is basically designed to record and analyze calls with prospects. And then finally, kind of the newest wave that I've seen is intent tools. So you think of, 6sense is a hot one right now, demand-based, Bombora, but products where you're actually able to see who is looking at your content from a specific company and then try to break into those companies. So that's what I think of when I think of the modern stack.
Got it. Okay. So you've got the sales engagement platforms, the data, whether it's Sales Nav or the data providers in that regard, the Gong style call recording and analysis, and then even some people you're seeing plugging in intent data for the sales development stack. So that's sort of your core stack. And open to questions, if anybody doesn't have any of those or, what they're using and things like that. But now, so we move to, you've got this stack in place, and now what? Okay, where are the gaps that you're seeing? Where are SDRs, it seems like there's a lot of things plugged in. There's a lot of things to keep track of. You got like 5 tabs open. Where are they spending a lot of their time with all these?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So one thing that I've really noticed, at previous organizations and even within, my own team in previous roles is just the amount of time that SDRs are spending doing manual tasks. That could be research, that could be writing extremely, extremely personalized messages to prospects. It could be pulling data from one source to another in a manual way. It could be all of those things. And the way that, I look at it, and I think a lot of the successful SDR leaders that I've worked with, the way that they look at it is, look, at the end of the day, SDRs have a certain amount of bandwidth. And, at some of these companies, SDRs, it could cost, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100K in some markets to employ a full-time SDR. So having a huge part of their job become manual and repetitive work around research, that should not be what you are striving for, in my opinion, as an SDR leader. What you should be striving for is like, how can I put my players in the best position to speak and qualify prospects? So that's really kind of the biggest thing that I've seen, is just the amount of time and bandwidth that it takes to do things like manually pull data, manually write these cold cadences, things around that.
And yeah, I see that a lot too with our clients. It's almost like there's two big parts of the job. One is working through all the systems that you have described and spending the time to research in order to have like a relevant message to go out and talk with the prospects about. And then the other side is like the actual speaking to the client, the prospects, and actually like saying something interesting in that moment. And when it seems like when you blend those two together, there's just a lot of inefficiency out there that we see.
Yeah, absolutely. I see the same thing.
So what can you do if you're a manager and you've got all these systems in place? Like, what's kind of a do-it-yourself way of trying to speed up the process and just make the job? I mean, it must be hard on the SDR too to spend that much time researching.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that doing repetitive and manual work, whatever it is interesting, but then it's also the opportunity cost of their time that they could be using in other ways, such as speaking to people. So I think there's a number of things that you can do to increase efficiency, but I do want to make one important point here, because this is not a one size fits all approach. I don't believe in that. I think it really depends on your team, the product that you're selling, and the market that you're going after. So for example, if you're selling a product and you have an extremely narrow market, like a total addressable market that's a couple hundred companies, or you're only going after the Fortune 500, or you're only going after companies that use a very, very specific technology, and that's your entire world, then I don't think that it is the, I guess, end of the world to be doing manual, very, very personalized outreach, because your market is so small that it's not like you're foregoing the ability to talk to other prospects. And you really realize that, you may only have a few opportunities to break into this specific total addressable market that you have. So I think that that's one thing that you really do need to consider. These pain points that I'm going to mention, may not be as big of a deal, but if you're selling a SaaS solution and your market is like, let's just say like RightBound, we're selling a solution and say we're going after companies that are over 50 employees, have at least 5 sales reps, and selling a product that's at least 10 or 20K on an annual revenue. Just making this up. Our addressable market is enormous. So spending all of our time doing manual work to write very specific messaging, for instance, to specific people, we're forgoing an entire market to spend time on a very selected number of companies, which doesn't make sense. But for companies that do have a pretty large total addressable market, there's a couple of things that I've thought about that I think you can do to really try to increase efficiency. The first thing, which is probably going to sound a little unorthodox, but I would strongly consider hiring either interns or some sort of perhaps outsourced cheaper labor to take off a lot of that manual work from your SDR team. Whether we're talking about interns or outsourcing, if they're able to just do basic things such as, pulling relevant companies, pulling data from sources, and they can become the intermediary between the SDR team and the sales ops team, do things like set up an SLA with them on how many new contacts or how many new companies or how many new lists they need to deliver on an ongoing basis, so that your team, your SDR team, is never sitting around just saying like, okay, so who do I go after next? Or, all right, now I'm going to have to go and look for all of these people's LinkedIns and then phone numbers from various sources. That becomes a waste of time. And once again, they have a finite amount of time, and SDRs, especially the successful ones who are overachieving, if you have a good comp plan, they're not cheap labor. So I think that that's one thing that you can do, that any company can do, in order to increase some efficiency. Next, I think you can also try to set up an environment where you have some like semi-personalized emails that are written out in advance for the SDRs. Obviously, a lot of people are going to house those in SalesLoft or Outreach. I do believe that you should do some personalization to them, but personalization that won't take more than a minute or so. So for example, if you're selling a product and you're going after IT personas, have variations of the email that vary depending on title and seniority and kind of their day-to-day. But I really, really would recommend having that framework set for them so that they can change a few things, send their email in their cadence, and then can kind of continue on to the next one, as opposed to sitting there trying to write extremely personalized emails that could take, 10, 15, 20 minutes to someone who the data says probably won't respond. One more thing, I guess, that I would certainly do in terms of the increasing efficiency that I've gone kind of back and forth on throughout my career, but over the last couple of years, I've kind of become a stickler for it, is like, really, you must have call metrics, activity metrics, and really hold reps accountable. Speaking from our personal experience, like I said, some companies just have a ton of inbound coming in. It's kind of rare, and they can, just kind of respond to those and hit their targets. I would argue that they could become more efficient, but if you have that set up and you're lucky enough to be growing that way, then good. But for us, for instance, we do a lot of outbound. We're an outbound company, and we've seen 80%, at a minimum, 80% of our meetings come from phone calls. And these are after people have already engaged in our content. For example, if we have an email cadence going out from our tool, we can tell that they have read our content, or opened up a white paper and started to scroll through it, or opened up a survey that we've sent and not responded. But then my SDR calls, and we're able to get some great meetings. Once again, 4 out of 5 of our meetings come to us that way. So the activity and the phone is it's absolutely critical.
Got it. Okay, so it sounds like if we go back, to okay, now I have all this stuff, where do I start? It's like you first have to kind of map out the process that your SDRs are following right now, and break that into like the work packets, if you will, that they're doing. So if they're blending everything together, then it's time to sort of break that out. And one of the suggestions that you made is, for that, once you determine that upfront research, we could potentially break out that part of it and give it to an outsourced, company or a group of interns, and then that would create a faster turnover there for gathering the research. And then the next one is, okay, we understand that they're spending a lot of time personalizing the email. They've got to like reinvent the wheel every time. So now let's look at creating, a 20% that needs to be personalized, and then maybe 80% that's just universal across prospects, for example. That would speed that up tremendously. And then
Absolutely.
you also mentioned, setting boundaries around the activity. So I think that, to your point, if you're not looking at it from that process breakdown, and you don't have benchmarks across each one of those processes, then, if it's not measured, it's not managed, right? You don't really know, and you can't really start to hold people accountable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think accountability in any business at any position is obviously something that's super important, but obviously I'm specifically passionate about, the sales development part. And we've seen, I've seen from my own experience, and we've also seen from the clients that we work with, is the teams that are picking up the phone and calling the right people, and have enough prospects preloaded and are not spending their time doing research, simply have much better results. Obviously that's not, it shouldn't be super groundbreaking, but I do think that, setting those, setting that standard is super important.
Yeah, and you got to start somewhere. So you were able to see that, hey, you're following this pattern, but you are getting 80% of the meeting set up by the phone call. So now we've got some data, we can optimize that and start running it. So tell me this: if you're looking at the account level, so say you're going outbound and you're looking at account prioritization, where does that part of like sorting the data and getting it ready for the SDRs, where does that come into play as far as looking at the process?
Yeah, another thing that I've seen that I think a lot of us, tend to forget about or maybe assume is, how does your team really know how to efficiently do the necessary research? I've seen a lot of different companies and companies I've worked for with I guess you could call it almost like a lack of methodology in the research. I always think that if you're going to have the SDRs doing the research themselves, as silly as it might sound, do a training on how to do research. I'm sure they all know how technically to find the information that they are looking for and everything, but I would really hold them accountable to saying, look, if you're doing this research on certain accounts, that's fine, but you spend 1 to 2 minutes on research and that's it. This is the way you do it. You look at these few data sources, you look at LinkedIn, you pull the information from these places. I think we've all, or at least I have, certainly been in situations where, you're doing research on a prospect and then you're on LinkedIn and then you see some interesting article and then you're down this like hole where like you look up and it's been 20 minutes and then it's like, okay, I got the person's, email and I know where they worked prior to this. So I really just think putting some structure in place around this is how we really do our research. But some other important things around the data part is I think purchasing a good mix of data sources is important. Once again, I know the tools like ZoomInfo and Inside View and Clearbit, and there's a ton of these different data sources. They're not all created equal, and they're not all created equal in terms of the personas and the types of companies that you're going after. One other thing that has become really obvious during the last 8 months or so since people have been remote is that the data that people have that's all focused on office lines and stuff, like that's not going to be as powerful as it was before. So it's super important whether you do this with sales ops or you have some sort of like a growth team or however your company works internally. I think that you need to have various data sources and then you need to find an organized way for someone to be able to cross-reference that data so that you're getting the most accurate data that you can. And this includes like direct and mobile numbers. I know there's additional sources for that. But as an SDR, none of this matters if your data is really poor or inaccurate, because like you're just going to do all of this work to reach out to someone and then you're obviously not going to be able to reach them. So, we've worked with clients that, have great automation and their process is great, but they don't have good data. So like they're shooting themselves in the foot and, one of the reasons that they may bring us in. One other thing is just kind of the, I kind of mentioned it a little bit, but the alignment with sales ops or whoever is kind of your operations person for the SDR function, make sure that you view them as an extension of your own team. They should have a clear understanding of your ideal client profile and who you all are looking to sell to. They should be delivering data to you in batches at given times, whether that's every 2 weeks, every month, however it works best for you, but just setting up that entire process so that once again, your team's never waiting around for data or who do I call next.
100%. It just makes me, it's funny because I talk to a lot of people who they've got head count for, 3 SDRs and they're trying to get them immediately. And then you start to dig in a little bit on how the data is structured, who's going to be doing this research, who's going to be prioritizing this. And they're like, well, we'll put in a ticket with the sales ops person, and it's like,
Yeah.
Man,
I mean,
I
yeah,
mean,
just
if I
from a
say,
business perspective,
yeah,
it makes no sense because it's like, I've been in situations where it's like, we're going to hire 10 SDRs this year. Like, let's go. But you don't have the infrastructure set up to make them successful. And just from a pure business standpoint, once again, we're talking about hundreds of thousands, in some case, millions of dollars in just, salaries and equipment and insurance to employ these people, but then not giving them the real tools that they need to be as successful as possible. It just really makes no sense. And I know that there may be other reasons why companies want to grow for certain reasons, but yeah, it can be kind of silly if you really think about it.
it does. It boggles the mind because, and people just laugh when I even suggest this, but if I had headcount for 3 SDRs, I would hire 2 SDRs and one super bright, incredibly data-driven, ops person to set up the program and make it hum, and they're just like, what?
Yeah,
So
no, sales ops
it's never
people,
too early. Yeah.
yeah, they don't get a lot of the credit, but sales ops people are some of the most important employees at an organization. I don't care, what kind of organization. If you're selling a product, having a strong sales ops team can make an enormous difference.
100%. Okay. So I have a lot of questions for you. One is just in, say you've got a little bit of budget and you plug in RightBound. How does RightBound work? And what part of it does it take care of this? Because it seems like when we worked with you guys, it took care of a lot of the account prioritization, the lead prioritization, and a lot of that back end stuff that I don't have a data guy. Right?
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. So yeah, as I mentioned at the top, basically what we offer is it's a pure SaaS solution. It utilizes AI and machine learning. Um, and the mission that we are on is to basically remove the manual and top of funnel work and cold outreach that SDR teams traditionally have to do, so that they're left with engaged prospects that are going to be pushed to their sales tools. So they spend all of their time reaching out to relevant people that have shown some sort of action that makes us believe that they're engaged. I can actually go ahead. Yeah, I can actually go ahead and just share my screen quickly just to show a quick graphic of, kind of how I think about it. So are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, when I think of the, our process, and once again, whether you talk to us about our solution or not, I definitely think that there are some things that you can take away from what we do and implement them, and try to implement parts of it in your own way. But we really think of the SDR world kind of as a life cycle. So it's like you have your ICP and who you think you want to go after, and you have your playbook, and then, automate the prospecting aspect. Then you do your touch points. And then the really important part also is going to be analyzing what you just did. Once again, whether it's RightBound or another solution, analyzing the success or failure of each step in your cadence so that you can see what's working and what's not, and then feed that into what you're going to do in the future so that you're constantly optimizing. So what we do at our organization is basically 3 major things. First thing that we do is we work with an organization to understand who they want to go after. That could be based on past success. It could also be based on breaking into a new market. But we really want to understand who is your ideal client profile. This could, of course, be based on company size or industry, or if they're hiring, or kind of basic things like that. But also, if they're using certain technologies internally and you want to go after them, that's something that we can help with. If you're looking for companies that have at least, X number of developers or X number of people in a certain department, those are the kind of things that we can help with. But essentially what we do is we learn your ICP at a very deep level. We're not a data source ourselves. We're actually connected to over 30 different data sources. So some of the ones that your clients may be using, some not. And then we generate net new prospects. So those data sources are cross-referenced against each other, and then we're able to generate prospects with extremely accurate data. Next thing that we do is run a playbook, which obviously the content's going to come mostly from our clients. So that playbook may be, emails, it could be automated social touches, it could be surveys, it could be gifting, and we also do targeted ads. But essentially, this playbook, you could customize it in all different ways based on persona, based on industry, and then those will automatically be run against the target rating, and that's completely automated. We're doing things like changing the timing and the order and the selection of channels and the number, the sentences in various emails so that the machine can constantly optimize based on performance, and you can get the best possible results. Once again, that's completely automated. And then from there, once people start to interact with the content that's being sent with them, the leads are then pushed directly to the tools that you're already using. So I think just about all of our clients are using either SalesLoft or Outreach or HubSpot. We actually have a few that are just kind of doing it manually. Once again, we don't compete with those tools either. Our goal is just to, feed the best possible information to them. So I don't want to turn this into a whole RightBound sales pitch. If you want to talk to me afterwards, my email is just my first name, jacob@rightbound.io. I'd love to connect with you, connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And I'd be happy to do kind of like a full demo and see if we're going to be a good potential fit for you. But at the very least, it's always great to connect with, kind of like-minded people who are at these types of events. And I'd be happy to kind of offer my opinions however I can.
Yeah, that helps a lot. I mean, it definitely for our company, we knew that, for example, we needed to talk to everybody involved in sales development at companies over a certain size and let them know that we were doing a conference, and so we would just get a Slack notification that we got in touch with somebody and they showed some interest, and then you just pick up the phone and, like you said, you converted 80% of the meetings from calls. You still have to call them,
Yeah, no, that's totally right.
Yeah.
AI and machine learning is great. Some really smart people built this platform that are, once again, far smarter than I. But we don't believe that AI can replace what SDRs are able to do. The best SDRs are able to take someone, have that emotional intelligence, have a great conversation. And we don't think that AI right now is going to be able to replace that human touch. But what you certainly can automate is everything that goes up to that point. And that's really what we're on the mission to do, so that, once again, your reps are spending time doing their job, which is actually talking to people and building your pipeline and finding money for your organization, as opposed to spending their day in Zoom info and writing cold cadences, once again, to people who are, the data says they're probably not going to respond.
Yeah. So the takeaway is, if you haven't done this before, either if you're an SDR, you're an SDR manager, you're an executive, you got to map out the process that they're following right now, break it out into discriminate pieces, and then start to, really monitor those activities to see how long is it actually taking. And then you can start to tackle some of those time gaps. Now, Jacob, I got a great question here from Michael Menina. It says, if SDRs are, say you've got your whole stack in there and they're underutilizing the tools, how do you determine if you've just got too many tools, they're all hacked together? Or is it like a training issue, or is it individual motivation to actually use the tools? I mean, this is something that I struggled with a lot as an SDR manager. How do you know if is it me? Like, did I not set it up correctly for the team? Or is it them that they're not using it for some reason? Maybe it's not useful, or they're not motivated. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that's really my answers are really going to depend. It's kind of a case-by-case basis. I've seen teams that have a skill issue. I've seen teams that have a will issue, and probably everything in between. I think that what you really need to consider is, kind of when you're purchasing these tools is, kind of like, what is the real ROI that I'm going to get from them? And the other thing that I would make sure and do is, like, make sure that you're getting some sort of a pilot period with whatever tool you choose, and put 2 of your reps on there and see, are they really able to utilize them and get great results? And then based on that, I think you make your purchasing decisions. I think a lot of companies get caught up in trying to buy the hot new technology because it's a hot new technology and it's a name, and they want to feel like they're contributing something, but they don't really have an understanding of how exactly they're going to utilize that. So what I would always recommend, once again, I can't just make a blanket statement saying it's you or it's not you, because I've been in situations where I've been leading teams and it probably was me. And then I've been in a situation where I'm leading teams and I'm like, this person is just not committed, or maybe they don't understand, or maybe they just don't have the necessary skills to be successful here. But what I would always recommend is make sure that you are piloting the tool and you as the manager have a clear understanding of how it's going to fit in, because you may realize during a pilot period, like, this isn't what I thought it was, or I think that this is a great technology, but my team isn't ready for it yet because, for instance, we don't have good data. So what's the point in going out and getting all of these super advanced sales orchestration tools if our data issue hasn't been solved yet?
That's a really good point. The only thing, what came to mind as well is, when after you've been an SDR for a few years, damn, dude, that is a big ass thing of water.
Yeah.
We're knocking you out here, Jacob. I love it. If you've been an SDR for a few years, you get promoted to a manager, or you've been out of that for a while. Now you're a director or you're VP. When is the last time that you actually ran the process that you have the SDR? That's a
great point.
doing? You know what I mean? Because you might sit down and go, this is a Rube Goldberg machine. I don't know if you don't know what that is, Google it. But this is this is all hacked together. We're spending way too much time on research. We're not prioritized. And, I'm not spending any time talking to prospects because we've got to do all this other stuff. You'll find out that pretty quick if you run the process yourself a few times. So
that's a great point. I definitely recommend that.
Yep. So I got one other one came in. It just says, where's the line I think you talked about this. Where's the line between research and analysis paralysis? And I think, anybody who's been an SDR, managed a team, about that analysis paralysis, that rabbit hole that you can go down.
Yeah. When it comes to the analysis, I'm always a fan of having that on a recurring basis and setting a time for that. So whatever you think is reasonable for your team, obviously you want to have enough data to do that based on like the results of your team. But I definitely think that doing some sort of analysis where you're looking at key metrics, and once again, don't limit yourself. Like, talk to your friends and colleagues at your company and your other companies and just try to think outside the box on what are the types of analytics that we actually need to do, but make sure that you are setting time for doing that. So maybe it's every other Friday at the end of the day, you're going to look at the data, you're going to look at the different steps within your cadence, not just the overall cadence performance, but every individual step of that cadence. Why are people only opening this email at 10%? Why are people opening this email at 40%? Maybe we need to make a change there. But I'm not a big proponent of making all of these changes on the fly, just kind of like whenever you feel like it. I think you need to kind of set your own benchmarks. So that would be, kind of my point of view. I can also, once again, regardless if people want to discuss RightBound or just sales development in general, I can also share some of the reports that we provide our clients within the platform that you may be able to do on your own, like, so that you can look at the types of metrics that our machine is actually taking into consideration. But I definitely think that, once again, the analysis paralysis thing is certainly real. You need to set up allocated time to do that and make sure that you're asking yourself, similar questions each time so that you're really able to track that performance.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, and that's from a management perspective. I think also, maybe the nature of this was on the SDR perspective. Like you mentioned, it's so easy to get distracted. Now we're working from home. It's even easier.
Yeah.
At 1 minute you're reading a 10K and getting everything ready, and the next minute, you're on LinkedIn, and then you're on Instagram. Next thing you know, it's Netflix. So it's like
Yeah,
it's
exactly. And
yeah.
that's if you don't have children,
I
that's like a
know.
whole,
Then
that's,
they come in.
there's lots going on.
Yeah. And I think, one rule of thumb there for the SDRs is like they had the 3x3. That was from Steve Richard at Vorsight, which is just get 3 facts in 3 minutes and then move on. Like hold yourself there. Otherwise you're going to go down a rabbit hole. We got a couple other quick things. First of all, Natasha, she's saying, hey, Jacob, hey, David. Natasha, thank you so much. I miss you. We need to do some more stuff. Natasha was a panelist at the conference, and she's amazing sales development leader. So Natasha, thanks for jumping on. Ben,
Natasha, actually, just as a side note,
yeah.
Natasha, she's like a mentor of mine and a really close personal friend. She actually hired me at Sisense in 2014 for my first SDR role. And obviously we've stayed in touch since then, but a lot of the stuff that I've learned from her.
Okay, so Natasha, we got to get you on one of these.
Yeah,
Share your
it'll probably
wisdom.
be more value than I'm able to provide. I
And
learned from
then
the
head
best.
over to the YouTube channel, because Natasha's talk at the conference got the highest ratings of any. So kudos. Okay, so Ben is a Tenbound alumni from a couple of years ago. Amazing guy as well. Ben, thanks. He gave you kudos on the graphic, which it is a great graphic. Let's put a link to that.
Yeah.
Any advice for using Gong or a similar platform when you're leading a team of 10? How do you choose how often, how many calls, to listen to? So that's a really good point, because if you have Gong, there's a couple other companies out there. We're agnostic here, but they're plugged in. You're getting some data on the actual talks. How much is too much? Like, where do you focus your time with something like Gong?
That is a great question. First thing that I always believe in doing is like working backwards. So look at the deals that your sales team is winning, and then let's go back and let's see like what came up during the calls. Were there keywords that came up a lot, or questions that were or were not asked? Things like, was there what's the percentage of time that the sales rep was talking versus the prospect? Things like that. And that'll probably be able to give you some really good insight on things that are going well. And then I would also do the same with, things that are not going well. So if you have a rep who is connecting with a ton of people and having, 3, 4, 5, 10-minute conversations, but they're not converting to meetings, start to do some spot checking in those. I think that's always a great thing to do. And then kind of depending on, once again, the makeup of the team and your bandwidth, I think spot checking is good to do, but I would kind of start with the extremes and then kind of go from there. Like, what do you notice from reps that are not converting these into meetings and opportunities? What are the characteristics and analytics? I know Gong's constantly releasing new amazing features on their product to do more focused on the analytics section. And then once again, start with, who are you winning? How did those conversations go? And then during your trainings, you're obviously going to want to try to put things in place so that you're encouraging more of the conversations that are winning business and turning into opportunities versus not.
Yeah, really good point. I mean, such a powerful tool, and it's made such inroads into the SDR roadmap, because it's like opened up all this data that we really didn't have before. And it's tricky with the SDRs because they're doing a lot of cold calling, but with the AEs, I mean, wow, what an amazing resource to have that data. So Ben, I hope that helps. And then Paul jumped on a little bit late. Yeah, dude, we're recording this, and just go over to the Tenbound YouTube channel or just get on the newsletter, and we'll send out a recording after. This has a ton of great info in it, so I want to go back and make sure that we transcribe it and shoot all the links out to everybody. But cool, Jacob, thank you so much, dude. You know what? I have a lot of work to do actually. Like I got to go back and look at the Tenbound, research process and map it out and like get some metrics on there because I'm not following a lot of the stuff that you gave us. So super valuable. Thank you so much for jumping on, and yeah, thanks everybody for participating.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time. Once again, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just Jacob Wiggins is my name. You can email me at jacob@rightbound.io. And yeah, looking forward to staying in touch with you all. Thanks again, David, for the time. Really appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you again soon.
Bye.